Coming up on Tech News today, HP's got some new laptops, Blackberry's got some bad news, but a little good news too, and Google wants to help you live forever. What's the landscaper doing to my internet cord? Tech News today is coming up.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com. Oh.
This is Tech News Today for Thursday, September 19th, 2013. Tech News Today is brought to you by Shutterstock.com. With over 28 million high-quality stock photos, illustrations, vectors, and video clips, Shutterstock helps you take your creative projects to the next level. For 25% off your new account, go to Shutterstock.com and use the offer code TNT9. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Sarah Lane.
I'm Aya Zakhtar.
And I'm Jason Hell.
And you may have seen on the internet that Tom Merritt has a little bit of a FiOS problem.
He's got a problem getting on the internet.
Apparently the landscapers cut a wire.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, you know, it's one of these freak accidents. So he is he's trying to join us, but we're going to press on without him, but it's going to be okay because we've got top 10 stories of the day in the news first.
Finish him.
Apple CEO Tim Cook, along with design head Sir Johnny Ive and software head Craig Federighi, gave a rare group interview to Bloomberg Business Week. It was on the eve of the Apple announcement. Among the highlights, Cook said to folks that Apple had never had an objective to sell a low-cost phone. Cook also said he doesn't let stock prices affect his mood. I've emphasized the true collaborative nature of iOS 7 design between himself and Federighi. For his part, Federighi reminded folks, Apple doesn't care about doing new. Apple cares about doing right. And of course, Cook got in a jab at Microsoft in reference to the company's purchase of Nokia, saying, everybody is trying to adopt Apple's strategy.
Google announced a new venture called Calico. It's a separate company financed by Google, and its goal is to focus on health and well-being, in particular the challenge of aging and associated diseases. I'm not making this up. Google announced that Art Levinson, former CEO of biotech firm Genentech, will be a founding investor and the CEO of Calico.
HP's got a new line of Android and Windows-based tablets and new laptops out today. Among the lineup, a special version of the HP Envy 17 now comes with the Leap Motion wireless controller built into the palm rest without adding to the thickness of the laptop. It comes October 16th, starting at $1,050. Also notable is the Spectre 13X2, the 13-inch slate with a 1080p display and a keyboard dock, and unusually for a tablet so big, no fan. It also comes with a Haswell processor and ships October 16th, starting at $1,100.
The second largest shareholder of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi, has died at the age of 85. Yamauchi ran the company for 53 years, from 1949 until 2002. When he started, Nintendo was a trading card company. By the time he left, Nintendo was a household name in video games.
The Wall Street Journal reported Wednesday that its sources say Blackberry is preparing to lay off up to 40% of its workforce before the end of the year. That would leave the company with 7,620 employees and looking lean and efficient to prospective buyers. Analysts widely speculate BlackBerry may plan to shut down manufacturing of handsets.
At the Tokyo Game Show, Sony demoed its PlayStation app for Android. The app would allow a person to use an Android device as a game controller for the PS4, and also it could be a hub for the PlayStation Network. Sony also did a live demo of the Vita TV, which lets a player stream their PS4 games to a second TV.
How about some good news for BlackBerry? Who's ready? The company confirmed Wednesday that its BlackBerry Messenger service will come to Android and iOS this weekend. While BlackBerry users are declining, the BBM service is still one of its most beloved features. The popular service launched on Android Saturday and iOS on Sunday.
Republic Wireless will offer the Moto X for $299 without a contract in November. The phone normally costs $199.99 on contract from AT&T, Sprint, and Verizon. If you wanted an unsubsidized version, Motorola will sell you a version for $599. Republic Wireless will offer the Moto X in black or white and says it's not accepting pre-orders for the phone.
Take-Two Interactive announced sales of Grand Theft Auto 5 passed $800 million in one day, making it the biggest launch in the company's history. The game hasn't even launched in Japan or Brazil yet. Expect that number to get bigger. unless there's an apocalypse, and then nothing will happen. Then expect me to take your car, take all that money, yo. Just kidding. I wouldn't do something like that. It's just a game.
You was talking about the apocalypse. The other day, Google dropped the NFC requirement for its Google Wallet app for Android. Now, Google has released a version of Google Wallet for iOS. The app will focus on coupons, offers, loyalty cards, and allows you to send money to others in the U.S. with an email address.
This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Shutterstock.com. We love Shutterstock because it's the place to find a perfect image or video for your next creative project. Whether you're building some sort of a new, cool, fancy website, some sort of a publication, maybe you're working on an advertisement, putting together a video, any type of project, you can choose from over 28 million high-quality stock photos, illustrations, vectors, and video clips. Shutterstock sources images from around the world. Professional artists are submitting their works to Shutterstock every day. In fact, 10,000 new images are added to Shutterstock's library every day. So every time you visit, you know you're going to find something new. You can choose an individual image pack or a monthly subscription to get yourself the best deal. You can download 25 images per day with a standard subscription, so it's still nice, good volume. And you can download any image in any size and just pay one single price. Shutterstock recently partnered with Facebook to provide advertising customers free access to Shutterstock images with Facebook's ad creation tool. So expect those ads to look a lot nicer. And if you want to buy ads on Facebook, now you've got a great library to choose content from. You got good search tools. You can search by keyword, but also by color. Maybe your new website is all green and you just need some certain tree pictures. All that stuff is easy to search, and there's light boxes for collaboration within a team. You want to save a few images and have somebody from your team go and look at it later. Shutterstock allows you to do that as well. You can try Shutterstock today by signing up for a free account. No credit card needed. Just start an account and start using Shutterstock to help imagine what your next project could look like. When you decide to purchase, use the offer code TNT9. That's TNT and then the number 9. And all new accounts will receive 25% off any package. That's Shutterstock.com. And for 25% off new accounts, use the offer code TNT9. Joining us to talk about the stories of the day is Chris O'Brien, technology reporter covering Apple and Silicon Valley for Los Angeles Times in person.
Yes,
hey, Chris.
Great to be here.
Great to have you. Thanks for making the trip up to Petaluma.
Yep.
Should we start off with this whole never dying Google thing?
We should. I think that's a great idea. Yeah, so Google announced a new company it's financing called Calico, like I mentioned in the news views, and it's focused on, quote, health and well-being, in particular the challenge of aging and associated diseases. I love that's their phrasing, the challenge of aging. One of Calico's major initiatives will be significantly expanding human lifespans. Arthur D. Levinson will be the CEO and a founding investor. Levinson was a former CEO of Genentech and is the chairman of Apple and Genentech currently. Google hasn't said how much money it's going to invest in Calico, though. Larry Page wrote on Google+, he wrote, quote, please remember that the new investments like this are very small by comparison to our core business, end quote, because people are kind of freaking out. What is Google doing with this whole concept here? Sources close to the project suggest Calico will start with a small number of employees and focus initially on researching new technology, because in the two press releases, the Google Plus post and the blog post from Google, there's not a whole lot said about what this company is going to do other than potentially increasing your lifespan. Chris, what do you make of this Calico?
Well, it's classic Google in a way. You know, it says so much about the company that they're able to launch just with the bare bones of information in a press release, and they get, a Time magazine cover story. We're talking about it. Mm-hmm. They get this huge amount of attention, and instantly it becomes this sort of credible thing, despite the fact that we really don't know beans about it, to be honest, other than Art Levinson's involved. He's certainly a substantive guy. You can assume there's some data play involved probably, in terms of trying to use some data they're gathering or somebody's gathering, but otherwise we're just sort of guessing about what it is. But, the first thing that came to mind, and other people who've been in the Valley will remember this, years ago, Larry Ellison sort of became public that he was funding a lot of aging research. And, of course, it became sort of the butt of jokes because, it was all about, Larry Ellison's trying to find the fountain of youth.
Right.
But when it's Google, we're immediately like, oh, yes.
Larry
very,
Ellison.
yes, very interesting.
Larry
you know.
Ellison is kind of outspoken, so I could see that being the thing. Larry Page, not normally, he's kind of a reserved fellow. So is Sergey Brin, minus the whole like running around on rollerblades and Google Glass on your face all the time, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
But Larry Ellison, outspoken, and like you mentioned, the Time Magazine exclusive. It's like the title, the cover of the magazine. Can Google solve death?
Yeah.
Do you want to live
Yeah, it's
forever,
not,
Lane?
Google didn't solve it yet. We're just talking about the idea.
Yeah.
Hey, remember that whole idea that maybe people will live a lot longer? Maybe Google should tackle this.
Yes.
They pretty much tackle everything else in Google Labs in some form. Self-driving cars, wind farms, and forever lasting life.
You can imagine if Google just like stopped supporting something like this. They're like, well, Google Reader didn't work out so good, you know. And then this whole like your increased lifespan, Chris. We're gonna stop supporting that.
We've given up on the death thing. you guys are just stuck. Of course, they're also all involved in the singularity movement in the university. So, you know, the solution there is apparently putting us in robots or melding us with machines. So maybe they're making more advances than we realize.
That could be the way to expand the human lifespan if you could put yourself into a machine. You think singularity machines? Do you think we're going to be Google's? Will we be powering Google servers?
I mean, this is not Google Ventures. This is Google, the company itself, right? So, I mean, I think that's at least where something like Calico does. You sort of put it in its own category because obviously there are a lot of companies that the VC arm of Google is financing on some level. But this seems like, although it is a separate run company and it'll have its own CEO, it does seem like something that Google wants to be as part of under the Google umbrella. So,
you know, one thing I would say that just on a serious note about this, it's a very interesting strategy that Google has overall, which is, say, compared to Apple, which of course might be doing lots of far out things, but keeps them tightly under wraps and never, you know, lets us know about any of this. Google sort of puts all this stuff out there as works in progress, whether it's Google Glass or Project Loon or Google Fiber or whatever. And so even if these things aren't meaningful in the short term, are going to be real businesses like robot cars or things like that, it does sort of create this sort of branding for them.
Right.
That, hey, we're this company. You know, everyone complains in the Valley, oh, everyone's just trying to make Twitter for dogs or some Me Too clone of some social media thing. We're out there trying to change the world. We're trying to do these profound things, even if, you know, we don't know much about them or the short-term impact is negligible. It does kind of create that vibe around them that, hey, we're thinking big, we're thinking long-term.
yeah. Pesky aging. No more. Well, then you have Google. Google gets thrown into all conversations. You know, aging technology. If some other company introduces something, then it turns into this company. Well, you know, Google's doing that whole thing with Calico too, whether or not they have any products to show.
I'm just kind of curious how much money Google's going to be pouring into this, because if they just put like 1% of what they make into it, it'd be probably one of the larger foundations working on this.
Sure, yeah.
Because they make such a crazy amount of money.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to this article in Bloomberg Business Week, which was Tim Cook, Craig Federighi, and Johnny Ive all talking about the future of Apple. This was the interview took place the night before Apple's big announcement, and there were some just kind of choice phrases. Of course, Tim Cook says we never were going to sell a low-cost phone. In general, that's just something that the media picked up and ran with. He says, our primary objective is to sell a great phone and provide a great experience, and we figured out a way to do it at a lower cost. Johnny Ive says, working with Federighi, who is obviously the head of software, and Johnny Ive is running design now, he says, we talked about how we can most effectively extend the collaboration that always existed. And then he says, if one person does too much, that's not collaboration, and that's not the way that we approached the future of Apple. Cook is dismissive of Android, which is not surprising. He said, quote, we didn't start opportunistically with 10 bits of technology that we could try to find a use for to add to our features list. Burn. And he says, it matters that people use our products. And he also questions the usage of Android versus the market share, which those numbers may be a little disparate. Federighi says that creating something new is not hard. Anybody can create something new. It's doing it right. He says new is easy, right is hard. None of this is jumping out at me as particularly insane. The three gentlemen sound like they're very confident, but they would sound that way anyway. Cook says, I don't really worry about stock prices varying wildly. Do we feel like they're really, really confident in this next step? Because things really have changed at Apple over the last year.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see how this has evolved just since the phones were unveiled last week, because there was one of the elements that we all got spectacularly wrong was that this was going to be a cheap phone coming out. Analysts thought it, reporters thought it, and even after they first showed the 5C, people kept calling it the cheap phone. Like, it took a while to sink in, like, this is not a cheap phone. This is the mid-price phone. This is not the thing that's going to change the game for them in emerging markets or with new smartphone buyers. But I will say this, looking back on it, Tim Cook has been telling us really for a year that he's not going to do this, that the company is not going to do this. At the shareholder meeting back in February, he made similar points. He said, you look at the people who chase market share numbers, look at Dell. He singled them out. Look what happened to them. You become a commodity, and then where do you go? In the earnings call in July, he said, I don't buy the fact that the high-end smartphone market is saturated, or there's no business there. And so he has been telling us that this is the strategy, and we sort of were either in denial or analysts chose not to believe it.
Right.
But now he's coming out and saying, look, I told you, here's the deal, here's where we're going, like it or don't like it, this is who we are and this is what we're doing. And so, analysts, it'll be very interesting to see how Wall Street reacts to this, because they really wanted the cheaper phone. They really believe Apple needs to do more to be competitive overseas, and Apple's saying, we're not going to go that route.
Yeah, the interview seems like very conservative statements. They don't want to freak out investors at all, so they're saying, yeah, what we're doing is normal. We're trying to do, Android is not really a threat. All these kinds of statements that just makes the position seem as strong as ever. But I wonder if the reason why analysts are constantly thinking there has to be a cheap phone, maybe it's just the Steve Jobs playbook of simply never saying what you're going to do. Like video on an iPod, nobody wants that. Or we're never going to make a tablet. We're never going to do these things. Then they go out and do it, and then everyone's like, oh, of course this is going to work that way. This kind of just, you can't say that we're working on something unless we actually have it. And that's what Apple seems to, for the most part, used to be their big thing, is they will not release a product unless it's completely 100% ready to go. That's why people were confused by Siri and some of these other, and Maps.
Sure.
Like, what's going on here? So if they're going to do a cheap phone, I think the 5C in the long run, this kind of plastic-based device, that's going to be easier to manufacture over time, because this is the first generation of this, so it's really expensive. Using the iPhone 5 components. Next year it's going to get cheaper, and next year it's going to get cheaper, and that device will replace the 4. There's your plastic cheap phone. They'll have that phone, but they never meant to do it. They just happen to have it.
I sort of imagine these guys sitting around reading headlines, kind of shaking their heads and laughing, like, "What do you want from us? We've got a very clear strategy here." And everyone says, "Cheap phones, they've got to do it." Apple misses. Oh my gosh, the phones are too expensive. What's going on? And it's like you sort of, there's a scenario that gets created that just does not reflect reality.
Yeah. Well, the risk here, though, is, and the reason I think analysts are focused on this, is that they're worried that one day developers will wake up and say, oh my gosh, there's 20 or 50 or 100 times as many Android devices out there. Why am I developing first for iOS, which many of the higher end, better developers still do. You see a lot of iOS apps come out way before Android ones still, despite the numbers. But I think that's the fear. At some point, do you get somewhere where developers say it's just too overwhelming the other direction, and they begin to defect. That hasn't happened by and large, I think, right now, but that is the fear. And then you start to see the ecosystem sort of come apart. If Apple can continue to manage that, which I think iOS 7 is part of addressing that, then maybe that never happens.
Well, let's move on to some laptops with interesting features coming from HP.
So let's talk about that 17-inch Leap Motion SC. It's the HP Envy 17 Leap Motion SC. It has Leap Motion's gesture recognition tech built into the palm rest. The laptop that means it has a touchscreen, a touchpad, and now 3D gesture control. Now, the Leap, because it's being built into the machine, is 70% smaller than the standalone peripheral. And The Verge tried out an early version of the laptop and found the Leap's placement a little odd. It's to the right of the trackpad, right on the palm rest. So it seems like it's difficult to move from the keyboard over to this 3D gesture space. Now, HP also warns that battery life is significantly decreased when the Leap Motion controller is enabled.
Awesome.
And recommends leaving the notebook plugged in when it's in use.
Oh.
And this device is going to cost $1,049, and it's available for pre-order on October 16th. Leaf's CEO, though, he's really psyched about the smaller microsensor. He's saying it's small enough to fit into tablets and smartphones, and mentions that automotive companies are really interested in Leap Motion. Chris, do you think the Leap has a future in laptops, or is there a real future in vehicles?
You know, the vehicle might be a better play. I read the same review, and I got to try, I think, a limited version back in, if I remember correctly, they had one at CES earlier this year. But it's not super exciting to me as a technology. I mean, I played with Kinect and things like that, and I get the appeal. I mean, my kids love that for gaming. You know, the whole, motion controlled thing, and maybe for TV and stuff like that. But I was, trying to picture doing this over my laptop, and it seems very clunky at the moment. But the one I'll say one nice thing about it, which is for better for worse, it's interesting to see companies putting so much effort into trying to reinvent laptop experiences this past year with Windows 8 and devices like this. I don't know if they'll get there or they're going to get mass appeal for consumers. But we're certainly seeing bigger changes in laptops than we probably have in the past 15 years, before.
Yeah, we've got
before all this.
Yoga hybrids and Leap Motion. Even when you look at the video that shows somebody sort of driving a car in front of a laptop, I mean the whole thing is just sort of screams like it's a laptop. Why exactly? Because it's sort of portable. It sounds like this is the sort of thing you wouldn't really be moving around too much. You've got a battery life issue. The screen is sort of smaller than maybe you'd want it to be with something gesture-based. It does seem like, maybe we're running out of ideas, and it's like, this laptop definitely stands apart from the rest.
Yeah.
They're doing that right, but I just don't know. I don't know how this is the perfect product for anybody.
What cracks me up is the fact that you could either touch the screen, so either you move your hands forward and touch the screen, or you move them down to touch the trackpad, or you could kind of hover in between. I'm like, why would you want all three of these things, or why would you be switching? I guess I'm not seeing the use cases for it. In the car, though, I'm really thinking that's the real future for something like this. Instead of fumbling with buttons or trying to mess with your AC or change your radio stations or inputs, if you can just do gestures on the side while you're driving, as opposed to, okay, where's that button? Oh, they moved it over there now? Oh, the new model does this. Like, there's all kinds of things that change. That might be the better way to go, because that does give you a scenario. You're not worried about battery life because you're in a car. That thing's running itself. You can simply just wave. That might be the way to go. I don't know if tablets and smartphones make any sense for this device either. Even though it's smaller, if it sucks down battery life, are you going to want that on your tablet?
Yeah.
To kill that? Are you going to wave over your tablet?
Yeah, the battery life thing is I'm still stuck on that. I mean, if you have the company saying, what we suggest you do, just keep it plugged in, then it's like, well, the laptop thing, then that just...
What's a 17-inch laptop? You could relate to a 17-inch laptop. That's not something you're supposed to be lugging around anyway.
Well, I did that for a couple of years, and yes, it was kind of painful. It's too big. It's true. All right, let's move on to Cyanogen. You may know CyanogenMod. Of course, we've talked about it. Custom Android firmware. Wants to be its own company. In fact, Cyanogen Incorporated is now its own company. It's led by Boost Mobile co-founder Kurt McMaster. And what they're going to try to do, this team, is devote themselves to building CyanogenMod as a platform, the next big thing. Some of the project's developers are now full-time staff, so it's running the way that you would expect. The next move, says the team, will be to release an app that simplifies the, as they call it currently, horrific installation process for CyanogenMod. The installer should start coming to the Google Play Store in a few weeks, with support expanding from a smaller group of devices that are CyanogenMod friendly to include as much hardware as possible at some point. No plans to charge users at this point. There is a partnership with an unnamed hardware manufacturer. We don't know who yet, and we don't know how far along the team may be with a partner. But the hope is that CyanogenMod can become the third major platform, of course, along Android and iOS in the smartphone market. It's interesting, though, because, of course, this is based on Android. But they want to offer more flexibility than obviously something like iOS or Windows Phone, which is a closed platform, but something that's leaner and better supported than some of the options that Android users have today. So, Chris, do you think that CyanogenMod can sort of be like the Samsung of Android, the standout that just has the better experience than the rest?
Well, I think the problem is that Samsung's still trying to be the Samsung of Android. I mean, I actually got, I mean, the challenge with all this stuff, right, is getting the developers that you're going to offer them something that says we're going to go off and do whatever we're doing, but for the Kindle or for Windows 8 phone or specifically for Samsung, and they're going to have their first Samsung Developers Conference, I think, sometime in the next few weeks. So they're all kind of going after those people. Windows tries to offer them a little bit better cut on app revenue, but it's tough. I mean, you've seen how much money Microsoft has put into this thing. They're still trying to get the best apps on their platform.
Right.
So you're really going to come down to what is it they're offering that I can do as a developer that I can't do on any of these other platforms. And I'll be honest, I haven't played with this, so I'm not judging them, on the quality or the technology, but that is the big challenge there. What is their pitch to that developer, who's starting the next Instagram?
Yeah, but it seems like it's almost like a fork of Android if they're doing this on their own. Because if you're going to use CyanogenMod on your phone, it's basically as close to stock Android as you can get without getting stock Android from Google. So, like, the big draw about CyanogenMod is that it's usually a lot lighter, it's faster. I put it on my Galaxy S3 a while ago, as opposed to having all that Samsung TouchWiz bloatware. The battery life was better, performance was faster. So the apps that ran on Android will still run on CyanogenMod, so it's not like they need to court developers necessarily. But this idea that they might go into hardware and people want to start using their version of it, I don't know if that's going to be that big a deal. It's like you can already do this if they can make it easier to get this ROM on there. Because a lot of companies, Samsung included, they like to really keep everything locked down. It's pretty annoying to unlock a Galaxy S3 or Samsung devices. HTC makes it really easy, so then you can load something like this. So I'm really curious what their real plan is, because if they exist and they have a great OS, how are they going to make money on that?
Well, again, they say that they're not going to charge users, but that may be a plan down the road at some point. If it's like, well, you pay whatever the cost is for just much better experience, that's some sort of customized version of Android that really, really appeals to people, then you have a lot of really interesting business prospects, not just for this team, but any team that wants to create the best Android experience possible. And of course, just because of the nature of Android, there are the possibilities of that. You can have lots of different forked versions of Android, skin versions of Android. It's, the possibilities are endless. But yeah, it's a lofty goal to say we want to be number 3 in the mobile OS market, but
it's quite a rallying cry.
It really is. It really is.
Come join us. We're number 3.
Yeah, poor Microsoft. All right, let's move on to another company that's, the cries might not be rally cries over at Blackberry.
Well, they would love to be number 3, right? The number 3 fight is going on between Microsoft and Blackberry right now.
More quiet sobs.
Yeah, this is a Wall Street Journal report saying Blackberry plans to cut thousands of jobs by the end of the year. The article says up to 40% of its staff could be let go. Blackberry employed 12,700 people as of March of this year. And a BlackBerry spokesman said they don't comment on rumors or speculation, but he did say, we are in the second phase of our transformation plan. Organizational moves will continue to occur to ensure we have the right people in the right roles to drive new opportunities. All right, Chris, are they just cleaning house? Well, assuming this is true, are they cleaning house for sale, or do you think that a smaller BlackBerry could actually continue to exist on its own?
I don't know. I mean, I think they're cleaning house, to be honest. I have a hard time figuring out, how they're going to cut their way to the innovation that they would need to be, as you said before, number 3. I mean, they're slipping to number 4 at this point. Although I have to admit, I do have a BlackBerry for work, so I hope they don't completely immolate at this point. I know, true confession time.
No, I just you're
my BlackBerry that I used to cover
breed.
Apple.
Yeah, all right.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's the problem is if they want to get back to the number 3 slot, they've got to come up with something dramatically different, or that represents a leap ahead. And cutting 40% of your people is probably not the thing that gets you there. Maybe it buys you some time if you've really got something cooking in the lab. But I have to believe it sounds like they're getting the balance sheet and the financial documents in order, and we're going to start hearing about bankers walking around the halls and kicking the tires and things like that. And then the question becomes, if that's the case, who would want them, and why would you want them? I mean, the list is pretty short, unless, again, there's a really valuable patents that someone puts a big price tag on, and then and you get the company thrown in, as a bonus, like a set of steak knives or something.
Yeah, this seems very last resort to me. This doesn't really seem like BlackBerry's got something under the hood. They're just going to fire some people and then the whole company will be transformed. We have been talking about who would possibly want to buy. It was RIM and now it's BlackBerry, and we continue to see manufacturing facilities shut down and people being laid off and executives leaving. And I don't see anything besides BlackBerry saying, well, if we are going to get sold, we're certainly not going to get sold unless we trim as much fat as possible. So that's what I see is going on here. I don't really see a very positive outcome.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a recent memory of a company cutting tons of workforces, eventually selling off. Nokia did this. They tried to get more and more nimble. They cut off they cut 7,000 jobs. They transferred a whole bunch of people over to Accenture. They did all this stuff, and they were trying to be independent and wound up being bought by Microsoft, or at least parts of it ended up being bought by Microsoft. So I don't think that an independent BlackBerry is going to be long for this world. So This is... guess they
maybe we'll all feel a lot better after BBM comes to Android and iOS over the weekend.
There's less reason to have a BlackBerry then.
I mean, yeah, I guess that's true.
I'm sure that's big consolation for the troops back at headquarters. And 40% of us are losing our jobs. But
BBM is we always hear about BBM as like, well, that's still a very, very interesting product. Are you using BBM on your BlackBerry?
I'm not.
No. Okay. Well, there you go.
I mean, I'm using it. It's our corporate
Sure.
thing. We get our email on it. There are a lot of people, and I understand this because I probably waited until the 3GS to get an iPhone, and I had a BlackBerry at my former job. Mm-hmm. For a lot of people, the keyboard is a thing. It still is. It's not a big thing. It's not a big thing like it was 3 or 4 years ago, but there's still a subset of people like cannot imagine not having the physical keyboard, and I think that's what at least keeps them having a heartbeat for the moment, but it's certainly not the trend going forward.
Well, a trend going forward is certainly music subscription services and companies trying to figure out what we like to listen to. Of course, Apple launched iTunes Radio with the launch of iOS 7. Obviously, iTunes Radio is part of iTunes. What is it? 11.1, the newest version of iTunes. I've been playing around with it actually quite a bit because I'm a faithful Pandora user. I love the idea of radio that's intelligent and kind of knows what I want to listen to based on genres or artist radio stations that I choose. Report says Apple is looking for radio music programmers. This is not like traditional programming. It's actually genre experts to select and promote songs in iTunes Radio that are coming from either major labels or smaller indie labels that release music each month. Candidates are expected to have a strong understanding and background in how the music business operates and have 5 years experience, knowledge in things like retail and radio and editorial and other music stuff. And what's interesting about this is you say, all right, well, iTunes Radio is most obviously a Pandora competitor. Everyone's been comparing the two companies, but Pandora uses algorithms. And for the most part, it uses algorithms really well. Every once in a while, I get a weird song in one of my stations that doesn't seem to fit, but you thumbs down and then it gets smarter. It's the whole Music Genome Project. Apple working with there is some algorithmic property here, but having people who are employed there to sort of pick and choose and also kind of work with the music labels themselves to figure out, well, who's sort of up and coming. This might not be something that Pandora as an algorithm can figure out that there's an artist that's poised to be the next big thing. That could be something that would give Apple an edge. Chris, what do you think? Does it make sense to have some editorial music picking and choosing along with the robots under the...
I think so, and I think I'm not the world's expert on Pandora, but my understanding is that they built the genome. People are involved in kind of dissecting,
sure,
the elements of those things, and I think human curation still matters. I mean, we all have friends who recommend stuff to us who we respect, and so if you can get some people throwing up up and coming artists or helping you discover things, that's what you're looking for. I think people are probably agnostic about whether it's a computer or human. Like with these services, what you're looking for is to discover new stuff, I think, that you haven't heard but that really rings your bell. And so anything they can do to help that happen is a plus for people, and I don't think they'll care if it's the algorithm or me or you doing it.
It's funny, isn't Beats Music, this is supposed to be their big hook. They're supposed to have a bunch of tastemakers and label and artists, people who are actually going to make these playlists for you, this curation by humans, this thing that's supposed to be their big hook. Now, if Apple does it, and iTunes is on everything, and it's on every iPhone, and they're going to have an immediate user base well, Beats probably is just super angry right now. This is what they were trying to do, to have a human-curated concept. If Apple's going to do it, Apple's going to have an advantage. The real thing is it going to bring you the music you want to hear? Like, I know when I was on Pandora and I wanted to listen to some really hard rock and they played Nickelback, I got really, really, really mad. So I put the thumbs down thing, and then they provided another Nickelback song. So I don't know if they were just trolling me or it was just a test.
Well, it's interesting because Pandora it's song by song because it understands that you may not hate Nickelback. You might have just hated that song. So it won't filter out the artists based on one thumbs down, but that doesn't always work. Because in your case, you're like, no, it's the artist.
You really need to have a human somewhere.
Yeah.
If Apple can figure out this whole Nickelback problem, I think they got a subscriber right here.
Chris, you make an interesting point that it's sort of all about discovering new music, and I think that there's kind of two sides of it. Sometimes I did an experiment this morning where I'm very in tune with what will play on my Daft Punk station on Pandora because I've curated it to the point where it's basically like the same 30 songs over and over, but I like the songs. It's comforting to me. iTunes Radio, you start Daft Punk Radio, and it's like, I'd never heard of any of these artists. It was a completely different experience. That's not a bad thing, but that was all discovery versus my comfort station.
Yeah, there's some catching up to do there for sure, although, I think I would compare it maybe to like the Maps equation last year. Apple comes out with their map, and immediately to the average person, it's pretty clear that like the data in this thing is much weaker than what Google has built up over the years. So there's a huge just catching up to do that they still have done a little bit, but still have a long way to go. So the question with your music likes and your dislikes is, how can they close that sort of gap in terms of both intelligence and then just the data they have on you? And so the mystery piece of that is, they have, especially now for people who have iTunes Match and you're putting the stuff up in the cloud and the Genius list and things like that, they have some bucket of data about you going into this. And the question is, do they marry it to this new service and it's pretty good out of the box? Or is it really going to take a couple years for them to get to that satisfaction point where you're feeling that same, comfort level when you boot up iTunes Radio? The other wild card there, of course, is that as you've seen and people will see as they start playing with it, there's an element of they're trying to get you to buy this music still. You know, there's the little button to hit, buy this for $1.29 or buy that song. I mean, I never buy music personally anymore. I'm a Spotify user, but that'll be the other interesting thing to see is, are they successful in driving more iTunes sales, or is this sort of a last gasp at propping up the sort of download digital music market?
All right, let's move on to, this is going to be a good one, the randomizer.
You got a smile on your face. Is there a cat involved?
Yeah, apparently the iPhone 5S, when locked, the whole thing is supposed to be very secure because it's going to read your thumbprint, or another fingerprint. But apparently, if you have a cat in the house or nearby, the cat can unlock the phone using Touch ID and the fingerprint sensor.
Now, this cat...
We have to first assume that it's not a hoax, that's actually real.
Well, can you register a cat's fingerprint? Because you can register multiple prints.
That's possible. I guess you could say, this is my thumb. So anytime you... you get that thumbprint back, it's me.
And how did that guy get an iPhone 5S when they're not out yet?
Well, it's a review unit.
It's a review unit, and a guy's messing it with his cat.
Or it's an Apple employee. Or it's Johnny Ive.
It's Johnny Ive and his cat.
Johnny Ive's cat.
He's got a bigger sense of humor than yours.
His cat would be white. That's clearly not his.
Maybe it's like an Easter egg they hid in it that, your cat's paw will open your phone.
But I wonder how... If we all get our iPhone 5Ss and it's like the first time, put your thumb here so we know who you are and how to know you in the future. How many things could you actually touch to the sensor so that that's the only way you can open your phone?
Well,
cats, dogs, lizards.
The TechCrunch reporter
Coffee
actually
cup.
he says he tested out a bunch of areas inside his forearm, around the wrist. He found that he could register and successfully unlock with both skin regions. So apparently, he goes, it's trickier to unlock consistently when you're doing that. But you could use all kinds of body parts, apparently, to register prints.
Is Apple going to patent cat to unlock, do you think?
Let's be, but so just to be clear, did he, if I don't know if you guys have tried this yet, but you push your thumb in there
Yeah.
and it reads, it scans for a while. You got to push it in several times. It scans all the ridges. I mean, did he set it up that he scanned all these body parts in, or the cat's paw, or did he use his fingerprint and then, but also the cat paw worked or his arm worked?
I can't imagine, unless the technology is really bad, that a cat paw would somehow be read the same as a human finger.
It appears he tried to register the cat.
Okay.
That's what he's saying. He goes, after commandeering a cat, I tested a colleague's hypothesis you could register the identifying skin segments. Because the way that sensor works isn't just like reading a fingerprint. It's supposed to be looking at the transdermal layer of your skin, and you're supposed to be able to get some readings off of that. So
It's
maybe
reading uniqueness after over whatever you're adding to the system, right?
So it's not necessarily a fingerprint sensor. It's like a skin sensor.
It's a pattern sensor.
A pattern sensor.
More than a fingerprint.
Gross.
Well, make sure if you want your cat to unlock your phone that your cat is, not like other cats and will be there at a moment's notice. That's a terrible idea. I mean, my cats are nice and they would never participate in this. All right, let's move on to the calendar.
Well, tomorrow you can get your hands on the new iPhones, and you can try this if you get an iPhone 5S, because they go on sale tomorrow. So does the 5C. Blackberry says Blackberry Messenger, like we mentioned before, will be available on Android on the 21st and on the iPhone on the 22nd of September. That's the calendar.
Let's see what's incoming.
Incoming message.
Do I want this one? You want this one?
I'll read it. Nathan says Adobe and the ruler. This, of course, was the whole idea of smart rulers and recreating the experience for illustrators. He says, I'm an illustrator who works for podcasts in animating clips from the show or just merchandise. I use the Wacom Cintiq display model for all my handiwork. I probably said that wrong. I'm sorry. I never know how to say Wacom. Wacom. I recently upgraded to the larger one that has the ability to accept multi-touch while drawing. I only wanted to upgrade for this feature. There's something to pinching an image I'm working on and rotating it with my hand while drawing, the same way I do when on paper. This increases my productivity dramatically since things are more intuitive. The Adobe Ruler has the same application for me. While I don't need the straight edge benefit, I can see it being useful as it makes it easier to draft.
I like that ruler. I know it's silly.
Yeah.
But it depends on the price. Did you see the Adobe hardware?
I didn't.
Project
I heard about
Mighty?
it. I haven't gotten a chance to look at it yet.
Yeah, we kind of had a conversation yesterday of, it's very cool, but how many illustrators really need to use this technology when there's still sort of that pen, paper, ruler type thing.
Well, I was glad that Nathan wrote in.
Oh,
So that
hello,
we could-
Tom.
Oh, hey.
Did you
well,
sleep
it's weird
in,
to say
or-
hello, Sarah. I've been here the whole time.
The whole
I don't know.
time.
They've been kind of
Sorry,
ignoring me.
We really screwed up this
You've
ignoring
been very,
Tom thing.
very quiet and polite.
That's right.
Would you like to weigh in on the show?
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's start from the beginning, okay?
Boy, that healthcare thing. Whew. Let me tell you.
Aging, right?
No, they just fixed my internet. They had to run a new line because they couldn't resplice that line. It was better to run a new one. The guy worked quick, though, I have to say. So big thanks to Jslow from Twitter, who kind of pushed this along. He works for Verizon. And Jesse and Byron, who did the repair work. They actually got me back. It still needs to be fixed. The guy was like, here, I'm going to put these together. Don't touch them. It'll work. And then Byron will come back and put the proper connector on there. So if I suddenly fall apart, that's why. Chris O'Brien, thank you so much. I'm so sorry that I had these technical difficulties and couldn't be on the show, but I was listening for most of it. It was great to have you along.
Yeah, it was fun to be here.
Let folks know what you're up to over there at the LA Times, where they can find your work.
Let's see. Well, there it is. latimes.com/business/technology. And I'm on Twitter at O'Brien. And generally covering Apple and Silicon Valley at large as kind of the foreign correspondent for the Los Angeles Times.
That's fantastic. It's so funny. We were talking before the show that I'm in LA working for a Bay Area company. Chris is sort of keeping that balanced by living in the Bay Area and working for an LA company.
Yes, we're making sure our universes don't collapse on each other.
That's right. That's right. That's awesome. Sarah and Ayaz and Jason, thank you guys for keeping the ship running without missing a beat. As always, y'all rock.
No problem, man.
We keep spare beats
We're here
in the back.
for you.
Do you want to take us out, Sarah? I don't mean to mess your flow here.
No, I actually prefer it when you do it because it
Like,
makes me
wait.
feel like life is normal again.
All right, good. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that you can vote in our subreddit, technewstoday.reddit.com. I'm glad I got the connection going in time for this because I think it was Kildy. One of the moderators was like, I didn't really like the way you told people to like all vote at the same time because that prefers a particular part of the world. Want to make it clear, all I was saying about voting in the subreddit is the last time we look at it before the show is like an hour and a half, 2 hours before the show. So if you vote after that, that's totally fine. I'm not saying don't vote them. We're just saying those votes go to the next day. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's the nature of doing a live show at 10 a.m. That's all I was saying. technewstoday.reddit.com to get in there and vote. You can find us on the web at twit.tv/TNT. You can email us, tnt@twit.tv, and give us a call. Leave us a voicemail, 260-TNT-SHOW. I'm actually off tomorrow for my 10-year anniversary. But Lindsay Turrentine from CNET will be joining us. We'll see you then.
Woohoo!
I'm supposed to make my head bounce.
The dancing is entirely optional.